Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Marty Kaiser with our latest episode of Real Estate Tidbits. I did want to mention starting next week, we're going to go to twice a week podcasts. So we're going to have our first ever podcast this coming Tuesday. And then, of course, we'll have our normal podcast on Friday. What I'm going to do with the twice a week format is try to be a little bit more diverse. We'll cover different topics on Tuesday relative to Friday. I'm also going to try to be more consistent with my time. So we're going to try to have each podcast be around 20 minutes. That way it'll be more crisp and fresh, and hopefully you won't get tired of hearing from me. So anyway, remember, next Tuesday we're going to have a podcast, and obviously we're going to get started today on one. One of the things I wanted to mention at the beginning of the podcast, for those of you that haven't heard all of my podcast, is what my background is. I've been in the real estate industry for over 30 years, so I've pretty much seen and done a lot of things in the business. I got into the business in kind of an untraditional way, because I didn't have a real estate background whatsoever, had no family that was in real estate. I actually was a business owner of a health and racquetball club that was a family business that actually was quite interesting and did well with that. But I transitioned to real estate, but I wanted to get into real estate in a more of a non-traditional way. I didn't want to do the typical ways that people do when they enter the industry. So I opened up kind of an alternative real estate concept that was new at the time, and it did well. I sold that one, and then I ultimately started a Century 21 franchise in the Hunters Creek area, which also did quite well, and I sold that one. And since that time, I've been a team leader as well as a high-producing sales agent. And the reason that I haven't gotten back into the ownership end of the industry is twofold, basically. When I sold my business years ago, it was done more for family reasons. I had 2 younger children, and I was just spending an inordinate amount of time building my business, and something had to give, and I just felt that I'd rather ease out of the ownership and spend more time with my kids, and that's the most important thing as opposed to business. Secondly, as real estate's evolved over these past years, it's changed dramatically, both from the agent's perspective and the ownership perspective. Some of the changes are good, some of those I didn't like, and I've gotten comfortable in not having to recruit, dealing with multiple personalities from an agent standpoint, trying to not worry about turnover and things of that nature. So I've been very comfortable doing what I'm doing. However, I always want to challenge myself, and it can get a little repetitive when you do similar activities for a number of years. So that's one of the reasons for the podcast. I wanted to share my hopefully wealth of knowledge to folks. I also am opinionated. For those of you that have listened, you've probably gathered that. So I try to give my opinions based on factual data as well as what I see as going trends in real estate. So I just wanted to give you a little insight into my background again for those of you that weren't aware. Switching hats a little bit here, I did want to share an article that I had read recently, a pretty lengthy article from Realtor.com News and Insights. And one of the very interesting pieces of information was about, just to give you an example of our tumultuous market in 2025, one of the largest builders on the Fortune 1000 list is KB Homes, and they've done business in the Central Florida area for a number of years. Well, they've had some challenges recently in terms of the market conditions. So one of the things that was revealed to their lenders in the latter part of March was that the company had to reduce prices by more than $30,000 in certain areas of Florida to drum up local business. And their COO mentioned during the presentation to investors that Florida was one of their worst performing markets during the first 3 months of 2025. So that was kind of an eye-opener, even though I've mentioned recently that this is going to be kind of a tumultuous year, that prices are going to stay pretty flat, et cetera. Compared to most parts of the country over the past few years, Florida has done well. We did expect a little bit more of an adjustment this year because we had such high appreciation in 22 and parts of 21 and parts of 23 that there had to be a course correction. At the same time, we found in the Florida markets this year that listing inventory has increased a little bit and buyers have decreased a little bit. So the combination of those two factors has contributed to prices being pretty flat, as well as our market going from a seller's market, which it had been for many years, to more of a neutral market. And the other thing that affects affordability, and I'm sure why this particular builder had a lower incentives and price reductions in 2025, were that the interest rates, as we've talked about, have remained a lot higher than they had been a couple years ago, as well as a lot of uncertainty with the course of direction of not only the economy, but how our government's operating. There's been just a lot of uncertainty that goes on. Out of the cities in Florida, according to this article, their weakest link by a large margin had been in Jacksonville. And now Jacksonville has somewhat different, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, dynamics and demographics than Orlando. We get a lot more benefit from relocations and the tourist trade relative to Jacksonville. So according to this article, Jacksonville had more than 7 months worth of unsold homes that had piled up on the market with KB Homes. And so that incentivized them to drop their prices even more. And so that was kind of an eye-opening statistic. Every big city in Florida has different dynamics. You've got the Miami area, of course. You've got the Sarasota, Naples area. You've got the Tampa area, and you've got the Orlando area. I would say out of those marketplaces, based on my knowledge and research, probably Orlando has been the most stable. You can make arguments for different points of view, but I think Orlando hits more of the price points that are more popular. They also, in spite of the changing economics, still get more of an inflow of folks from out of the area. One of the concerns has been recently is that Canadian business looks like it's on the decline, possibly by a significant basis. And the reason why we're seeing that and why it's forecast is because of the potential tariffs and, for lack of a better term, price wars with one of our allies. The Canadians are reacting by withholding their spending in the Florida area, because the Canadians are one of the big foreign markets that have always frequented Florida. They've gone to 3 areas, really. They go to the Orlando area, they go to the West Coast, Sarasota and Naples, and of course they go to Miami as well. So that's definitely a point of concern. So when we talk about the uncertainty in economics and how our government's taking kind of an extreme path possibly, the effects from some of our foreign friends remain to be seen how much that's going to negatively impact not only real estate, but the hotel business. I mean, all these businesses that rely on out of town consumers and tourists, if they basically do kind of an unofficial boycott, it's not going to be a good thing for the Florida markets. So we'll just have to keep a close eye on that. One of the things that I'm seeing too is that, buyers expect to negotiate more right now. I think there's definitely more emphasis now that sellers need to be really attuned to sharper pricing, to taking care of cosmetic defects more so than ever right now. And so that when people come into a property and what is their first impression, it's really imperative that you eliminate any things that would detract from a person's experience in a home. And that also correlates to really having it staged optimally. These factors are going to contribute to three things. Number one, the houses that have more positives going for them and obviously less negatives, if they're in desirable areas and if they've been updated homes, are going to continue to sell quicker and for solid prices. Homes that have more of these factors that buyers are not that appreciative of, they're going to sit and or they're going to generate a lower price. And obviously everybody wants to sell their house for the highest price in the quickest time frame. So those are definitely things that current and future sellers should strongly consider. From a buyer's perspective, they may have actually some advantages because if they see houses that have been sitting on the market for a lengthy period of time, or if they see houses that need a little bit of updating, they can get a better value on those houses, and then they can put their own taste and investment into the house. I know some people are going to be of the opinion that they want a turnkey house, and those type of houses may not be for them, or they may not want to invest funds of money after they've become the owner. But for the customers that are able to take advantage of those negative components, they're going to get a better value on that property, and then they can make that home into more defining of their individual tastes. So there's two ways to look at these things when you're both on the buying side or the selling side. And these dynamics tend to have a high emphasis. Transactional volume right now is a little bit down from 2024, and 2024's was a little bit down from 2023's. In the Orlando markets, pending home sales are definitely down some compared to last year. And the markets are and the time on the markets presently in the Orlando area is averaging about 10% more than it did in 2024. Also, approximately a quarter of all properties for sale in Orlando had their prices adjusted downward by around 4.5%. So none of these things are surprising to me because obviously I do keep my pulse closely on the market, but they just point out what I've just said in that it's important to price your house properly to start with, and it's important before you put your house on the market to have it in its optimal condition. And if you accomplish those two things, hopefully you're less prone to have to lower your prices. And of course, the other things take place. You get the premium price for your house and you sell your house quicker. One of the dynamics that I find today too, and this is more of a societal thing, is that people a lot of times have less respect for a professional's time and effort. I'll give you a current example that I recently experienced. And even though I've been in the business a long time and my positive experiences outweigh my negative experiences, I'm still sometimes disappointed when I get a negative situation. due to indifference or lack of appreciation from a customer or a potential customer. I have some customers that were previous customers, and they've been always a little challenging to work with. They were investors and landlords more so than flippers of property. So like a certain percentage of investors, their main objective is profitability. And so when they oversaw their investment properties that were tenant occupied, they always tried to use the cheapest methods available and sometimes take shortcuts when things needed to be repaired or changed. And so when you have that type of position, usually it's reflected in the tenant's behavior, because the tenants frequently figure, well, the owner really is not that interested in maintaining the home. So, of course, I'm not going to have the same interest in maintaining the home. Also, if you're not a great landlord, you tend to have more turnover in your property. So people only stay a year instead of being more long-term tenants. So what that causes to the landlord is actually more money, because every time you have to find a new tenant, there's a cost with that. And you also have the potential that the property could sit vacant. Whereas if you had taken better care of your house, been more attuned to the tenant's situation, quickly took care of negative situations, you're more likely to have longer term tenants, which is going to be more profitable for the landlord. At the same time, these landlords / investors that I'm referring to, they were always, trying to negotiate my fees downward. And, I take pride in the work that I do. I'm more flexible on commission rates because I kind of look at every situation individually. So I don't have 100% hard and fast rules, but I do try to be fair to both myself and the customer. And my philosophy in real estate has been it always has to be a win-win scenario. So these customers, because they've been repeat customers, I probably gave them a better expense program than I would for most people, because I still had to work hard, and they weren't necessarily easy customers to work with. So a lot of people on the outside looking in would probably criticize me, saying, you lowered your prices downward, you had challenging customers, and you still maintain them as customers. Something doesn't correlate there. But anyway, I did. And, I've worked with a lot of different customers, and I'm pretty adaptable. So recently, they had another home that they were considering placing for sale. And so like they've done in previous situations, it took a lot of communication, answering a lot of questions, educating them informationally, etc. And so we were just in the process of arranging a time for me to stop by there to take a look at their property, because this was one that it was a new home that they had purchased without the benefit of having an agent assist them. So I hadn't been in the property previously. And so we had tentatively scheduled a date, and I was rounding back with them to reconfirm the date and time. And at the same time, they kind of threw me a major curveball, said, I'm sorry, but we've decided to utilize a neighbor of ours. And the reason that they gave, basically, and this had never been discussed with them as any type of requirement, was that, the neighbor only lives a few doors down, and she can be present at each showing. And so I understand why that might seem attractive to some sellers, but that had never been discussed with me, whether I would be able to do that or not. And I don't know the background of this agent, so I can't comment on whether they're an agent that's done a lot of business and has the credentials that I have. But nonetheless, they kind of did it in a cavalier fashion, and it was just like my time and effort didn't seem to have much value to them. And everybody wants to be valued, whether they're in the real estate business or in any kind of industry, and especially when you've gone out of your way to try to give the service and fee structure and stuff that was in line with what their hopes and expectations were. So I had gone out of my way to probably sacrifice with these people over the years. And we had an intermittent ongoing relationship that went back, more than 5 years. And my results in the past had all been very favorable in any transaction that I was involved with them. But nonetheless, that's an example that got me a little bit disillusioned. So the decision that I've made with those particular customers is that I won't work with them anymore. Regardless of what type of situation arises, even if it's seemingly on the surface like a favorable situation for me, I'm just not going to do business with somebody that I can't really feel comfortable with their integrity, their trust, and their lack of putting value on my time and my skill set. So that's one group of folks that I'm going to walk away from. And I used to tell new agents that entered the industry that I had hired that it was important for them to evaluate the customer as well, to make sure that there was a good fit in terms of what the customer's expectations were relative to what the agent's expectations were, and did they have a good fit in the vision and personality and things of that nature, and to make sure that the customer was serious, so that we're professionals and they weren't wasting their time. Unfortunately, most realtors don't act like lawyers, in the sense that lawyers charge for pretty much any time that they spend with a customer, where most realtors don't. We're compensated on a commission basis, so we have to closely monitor our time and effort relative to making sure that we're making a living. But anyway, that's all for today. One last thing, the NBA playoffs have just started. The play-in games are concluding tonight. The playoffs, especially in the Western Conference, look like they're going to be really good. My predictions before the playoffs get underway any further is I think the finals will take place with Oklahoma City against the Boston Celtics. And I think it's going to be a great final series, but I'm going to go out on a limb and go with the younger upstart team and say that the Oklahoma City Thunder will be the NBA champions for 2024-25 season. So that's all for today. Everybody have a great Easter, a great weekend. Enjoy your families. Be safe. And we look forward to you listening to our next podcast this coming Tuesday. Marty Kaiser out.